How's it going, everybody? Star Wars Talks here. Today I got a little bit of a video for you guys about the Leslye Headland interview recently. It's a long video, honestly, 29 minutes. I'm not going to cover the whole thing. I'm going to break it up into bits and pieces, probably pause here and there, give my take and my thoughts on what she's saying, as well as the interviewer here. I do not know much about Leslye Headland, aside from the Harvey Weinstein things, and that I don't really like The Acolyte, and she's obviously written and directed some of that show, so just going to take it for what it is and kind of see what she says here and give my thoughts and my ideas on it. So let's get into it.
So, hi, Leslye. How
I
are you?
also don't know who
Hi, good
Rachel
to see
Leichman
you.
is either.
Good to see you. So,
Not familiar.
my first question is kind of off the rails already because I want to know what they tell you at Lucasfilm. Because, like, I know the dumbest argument that people have had about the show about Kayadi Mandi, and I'm like, here's the thing: it was deemed not canon anymore. And as someone who I know you also love a non-canon bitch in Mara Jade, what is kind of the deal with Lucasfilm and the stuff
Mara
that
Jade
was
and
canon that is now no
Ki-Adi-Mundi have
longer
no
canon?
correlation.
How do they kind of
One of
tell
them
you
was in the
what you
movies
can and
and
cannot do
is
with it?
canon.
Well, definitely with
Interesting.
well, there's Pablo
Yeah.
Hidalgo. So Pablo is always the person that I go to and say, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing this thing. I think it works for, you know, these narrative reasons. But you let me know. I know that in Legends it's this, and I know that in canon it's this, but I'm not totally up to date in terms of how you guys feel about it, as a as a studio." So I don't know what went on with Chiarimundi. I heard there was some drama.
It's the dumbest thing ever. It's about a birthday. But I was like, it's
Is
not
it
deep.
really?
It's not just that it's about a birthday, it's that it completely breaks the Star Wars canon and kind of the whole idea for the prequels. It's more so the quote from Ki-Adi-Mundi saying we haven't seen the Sith for over 1,000 years, and now here the Sith are, 87 or so years before the prequels start. It just didn't make any sense, and it kind of ruined the canon that was basically part of the reason for the prequels and the start of Star Wars itself. So I think it's a little more than just a birthday, and maybe she's just not familiar with the canon. This interviewer, but we'll see.
But I was like, it's not deemed canon anymore. And I like looked that up and I was like, yeah, because it was like in a card and all this stuff. And I was like, listen, I know Leslye is like me and we love non-canon characters.
Yes. Yeah. Non-canon is the best kind of canon.
Okay, see, this is another thing is like I said about Mara Jade and Ki-Adi-Mundi, there's no correlation because, again, the interviewer is acting like Ki-Adi-Mundi here is non-canon, but he is extremely canon and a big part of the prequels. So, people are going to fight back and forth about this whole argument about the Ki-Adi-Mundi stuff. I think at this point, it's ridiculous. It's kind of expected from Disney to do something like this. But, again, here, it seems like this is going to be very catered towards the Leslye fan club here, which is fine, but I'm not a part of it, so I'm just going to keep watching the interview and see what else they say. It goes deeper than a
half of the
birthday.
characters I love, like, they're not canon anymore.
They're gone. They're gone. Jason and Jaina, they're gone. Mara Jade's gone.
my twins. But speaking of twins, great. Twins are always a theme in Star Wars, which I do think is very cool that the show is like, yep, it's everywhere. Twins are just in Star Wars.
For fans who crave more, join us for a night of camaraderie, epic play.
When you guys were orchestrating May and Osha in the beginning and trying to navigate exactly how those two characters would function as twins and also like represent kind of the light and the dark as the other twins have done in the past, kind of Luke and Leia are the exception to the twin rule. But how did you guys kind of navigate how that would all work? Because they're not exactly here's the light and here's the dark. They both kind of have that gray area.
That's so true. And it's definitely not a new trope to have, the bad twin and the good twin, like the light twin and the dark twin, and then they switch places and then they switch back. Like, that's a pretty.
She recognizes how all over the place the Acolyte is with the twins switching places so many times. Like, we're at the point now where Osha seems like she's going to be in the dark side and May might actually go to the light side and train with Soul or something. I think the show's heading into a season 2 because Leslye has already talked about potentially creating a season 2. So I think that's where this is going, and it's going to be hard for them to not make a season 2 because I feel like it's going to end on a crazy cliffhanger. the switch back and forth is just, it makes no sense to me. It would make sense to me if maybe the series was a bit longer, we saw more of Osha and May, which I don't really want to, but it would make more sense to me if that was the case and we saw more of the the light and dark side trope within themselves. But we don't get to see that because the show is pretty short, the episodes are relatively short, and the pacing is all over the place. So it really doesn't make any sense, and it's kind of irrelevant. So,
I would say reliable way of telling.
but
A
she's right. This
thematic
is something that
story,
we've seen about a billion
utilizing
times. The twin
twin
trope.
characters.
One's good, one's bad.
But I will say, to answer your question, so much of that was a mandala. Like, as a writer, you know why you're doing something thematically. You can definitely justify, especially a choice like that one. You can also justify it character-wise, narratively-wise, personally, feeling bifurcated as a person, as a human, as a woman. Like, you can make all of those choices, but somebody has to actually do it. And I felt like Amandla, when she understood the breadth of what she would be doing, dug so deep into both of the girls early on, deciding their walks, like early on deciding, what their sort of animal familiar might be.
I disagree. I think that again, the Acolyte just seems like it's all over the place with the writing and the switching back and forth. And obviously, you do have Amandla playing both, light and dark side twins. And I don't. She could be a great actor, but I think in this show she doesn't play either one of them very good at all. I have no feeling that Osha really is dark side, and I don't really have any feeling that May is really light side. They both seem semi-neutral and more just conjoined together, which I get they're kind of going for here. But even then, the trope between the twins, once again, it seems like May and Osha are fighting, and I get that with the, you probably fought with your siblings if you have any. But May and Osha don't get along for 2 seconds and say they want to basically, May says she's going to kill Osha, and then all of a sudden we get, May wanting to partner with Osha again. So, and there's nothing that happens in between there that would cause that. So, it doesn't really make any sense in my opinion.
If they had one, deciding.
Not just my opinion.
Who was born first, who was born second. Going into a bunch of really granular things that I was very impressed by, and I don't think the whole theme wouldn't work if her performance wasn't how great as it is.
It's not great though, and I don't mean any disrespect to Amandla again, but it's not a great performance. A lot of people have no emotion towards these characters. I think Soul is the only character I have any sort of emotion for. Like if he died in the show, I would be like semi upset. May and Osha, I just have no feeling towards them because the writing is so horrible for them. Amandla really just, once again, could have been a cool character, but the writing just lets them down. It's the same thing with Rey. It's the same thing with John Boyega's character Finn. It happens so often in Star Wars since Disney took over that it doesn't even surprise me anymore. I'm more surprised when we actually get a well-written character.
Yeah. Well, that was my favorite thing about episode 5 was when May cuts her hair, and I'm like, girl, you still got that thing on your forehead. You move your hair. And then,
they could just move your hair. They could just move,
like,
and they'd be like,
huh.
She's like, it's okay. It's interesting. It plays out very interestingly in the next episode.
Watching this back from, seeing these episodes actually already happen, I'm not gonna do her dirty like this. But watching the episode that does come after this, since I've already seen it, since this interview was from a little while ago, I've already seen the episode, and a lot of you have as well. The episode that she says plays out, like it's crazy what plays out next, is not crazy at all. It's probably the most easily understood way in accepting that we knew what was going to happen already. Like we already knew that May went with Soul, and we knew that Soul was going to find out it was May. Like in the beginning of the episode, I was like wondering why does Soul not know that it's May? Like she has the thing on her face. Makes a lot of sense if he would know. And he doesn't know. He doesn't figure it out for like half the episode until the little robot comes in and basically tells Soul that, hey, this is May, this is not Osha anymore. And then she gets interrogated and questioned, and that's really that. It wasn't crazy at all. Still don't think the show's crazy at all. There's been 2 episodes or 3 since then. and nothing crazy has happened. So we'll just keep going here.
I don't know if it was the greatest idea, but she was definitely
She was thinking, she goes, I got this. And I'm like,
yeah, she was, we'll put it this way, she was thinking emotionally, like she was definitely,
she was thinking emotionally. Basil's like, here I come. Like, I'm
yeah,
gonna
Baz
take
was
it.
like, I got it. I'm a little worried. Somebody sent me, I got a lot of tweets from the episode 5 because, people were just sending me a bunch of screenshots.
Uh,
And one of them was like, it was like, I hope Pip's okay. And I was like, or like, I hope Pip comes back or something. And I was like, he's there. Like he's,
Didn't she
maybe
say
it was
she hasn't been online,
Basil picked
like
him up.
I was
learning
well
anything
aware
about
because
the
I was
show,
like, well,
about the
my
fan
favorite
reactions?
character's dead, which is a Wookiee. And so I was like, I'm gonna follow the other furry little thing around.
It's not the last time you see him, though. It's not the last time you see Kalnaka. So
Good, because I love a Wookiee. They're my favorite characters in all of Star Wars, and I was like, cool, this one's a Jedi.
Y'all know what happened to Kalnaka though, so when I know she saw that episode, and she like, there's just no way she was happy with how the Kalnaka character turned out. One of the most boring characters in Star Wars in the most recent times, because I think the guy that plays Kalnaka did a great job. Obviously, he doesn't have to really say anything, but he does a great job portraying Chewbacca in the sequels and stuff. But again, no hate to the actor, but they just wrote the character horribly. We saw what happens to Kalnaka, and it's just boring. Like, it is just boring.
Jedi, and then he died.
and it was
But-
like off screen death, the worst kind of death. Yeah,
Again, why are we doing off-screen deaths with $180 million budget show? We're doing off-screen deaths. Like, the Kelnaka thing was just embarrassing. As a Star Wars fan, that was the most embarrassing death. Like, show something. Like, we want to see what happens. We want to know what happens. And there's no argument saying that, like, oh, it's too violent. We already saw what happens with Chimere and how he kills, like, 8 Jedi. So, like, just show us what's going on. We want to know. Like, these Jedi aren't even important at this point in time. I thought Kelnaka was going to be this awesome, like, Wookiee Jedi we've never seen before. Off-screen death.
it was interesting working on the show. There were several, writers, cast, crew. Well, we've got to preserve this surprise. This is a big reveal here, and I was like, I just feel like as a fan, if you announce that cast, which we did back in like 2 years ago or
Yeah.
whatever it was. If I see Manny Jacinto as third on the call sheet, basically, I'm like secret bad guy. Like I don't even need to know like what the log line to the show is. I'm like, oh right, the secret bad guy. He'll be secret bad guy, and something else will happen.
Does it not blow anybody else's mind? Don't you want to have some sort of surprise factor in the show? Like, she just basically said they were discussing a surprise factor, but she just also said in the same sentence that Manny Jacinto being on the call sheet, you could look it up months ago, and Manny Jacinto is on there. She basically said we put him in the show so everyone knew he would be a secret bad guy. And I just think that if you want to hide the surprise, like, maybe just don't announce him on the call sheet. Don't show us him. It just blows my mind. I want to have some sort of surprise and fun with Star Wars, and it's been tough.
See what we'll see how it goes down. So, but I was
But
actually
that's ruined the surprise.
because the central
it was so easy to know that it was going to
mystery
be
of
him.
the show is much more about Sol and Osha's relationship, or Sol's relationship to the twins. The reveal of the Master Mace Herb to me was basically I don't want to say a red herring, but essentially it was like here's the sub mystery, I would guess, so that you would get in this space as a viewer, specifically a Star Wars fan, and think, oh, they want me to like care about this for several more episodes, and it's like, no, we're just going to do it now, and so he can murder these people. And so to me, it was not preserving the surprise was not very important. Like, what was important to me was preserving the character design. That was the thing that I was very concerned about getting out, was what Manny looked like once you saw him.
And there's no doubt about that. Manny does look pretty cool. Like, I think we can all agree on that. But again, why ruin your own surprise for your show? Why not care about it? I think that's something that's, Leslye has also hired people that for writers that do not care about Star Wars. I've never seen it. Again, it just comes to the point. It's like, don't we want people that love Star Wars to be working on Star Wars? Don't we need like 15 Dave Filoni's in there working on Star Wars projects, not 15 Leslye Headlands? that obviously don't care about preserving the surprise for the fans. Like growing up seeing Darth Vader, I mean, that was a huge surprise, and it was so cool seeing Darth Vader on screen. Growing up with the prequels, especially, and just having that preserved for me as a child, I remember how important that was for me, and wanting to show my friends and things like that. And then you just get a show like this, and she's like, "Yeah, we didn't really care to, surprise everyone with who the Sith was, just how he looked. He looks like Chimere does, but with some armor. Like the Cortosis aspect is cool, but we already knew that what the helmet looked like months ago because we saw it in promos. We've already known so much about the Sith character. We just didn't know it was Manny Jacinto or Chimere. So, again, blows my mind that she would just not care enough. It's basically what she just said.
Because he's inspired by this character, Drunken Cat, and Come Drink With Me, which I think.
Of course,
I said
he's
in
inspired by
interview.
another character from
and
another
in that movie. Like, you know something's up with this guy. You're not, they're not looking for a master, so it's a little bit different. But you know what's going on with this guy. There's another story going on with Golden Swallow and all this other stuff. But when he reveals himself, you're like, that's a different fucking person. Do you know what I mean? Like his role is not a huge surprise, but that's a different guy. And I didn't realize that. I didn't realize that Manny was going to be as the only word I can think of is like groundbreaking to me. Seriously, like I knew he was a great actor. I just didn't realize when I watched him
I gotta just speak up and say that I think that's an interesting point to bring up about Manny being very groundbreaking, knowing he's a good actor and stuff. People like him already, but it's partially because of how his character was before he was revealed to be the Sith character. He just kind of seemed like, I don't know if it was just me, but he seemed kind of like not a loser, but not powerful, had no pull, really couldn't do much besides be like May's sidekick character. He just seemed like he was, when I first saw him, because I didn't know the actor beforehand, I just thought that he was like May's like kind of bitch for quests, and he just kind of followed along with her and helped her on where to go and stuff. And I think him as a Sith was pretty cool, but him being his character and then turning into the Sith, I did not think was very cool. Just because I don't really like the fact that he seems like such a quiet, but there was no darkness to him, if that makes any sense. Anakin, there was this crazy darkness to him that was building up between 3 movies, almost through the 3rd movie, and it just kept building and building and building, and we see him turn into this dark character, and we understand the reasons why. He lost his mom, and things kept happening to him. He wasn't granted a master for the Jedi Council. Things like that kept happening to him, pushing him to the dark side. With Manny Jacinto's character Chimere, we just do not see that. We don't see any sort of push and pull from dark to light. We just see this guy that's, obviously he killed somebody and worked in their shop to make a hideout for May and him. But aside from that, the way he talks and things like that, you would have never just thought he'd be a good Sith character. And even beforehand, I was talking to friends about it. I was like, I actually hope he's not the Sith character, because he doesn't seem like he'd be good for a Sith character on screen at all. And I will say my expectations with that is like, it was kind of cool seeing him revealed as the Sith, but the episode after that was just horrible, in my opinion. All the episodes since that one have been horrible, and the ones before it too have just not been good.
Play the character the way he did, and he really built that character from the ground up. It's a very mysterious character on paper. So much of him is a secret. Even his name is not Chimere. So it wasn't like Amandla, who had the whole season, had all the scripts to really understand, like, I can chart this character arc and et cetera, et cetera. Like, Manny was sort of dropped into the middle of this story and said, okay, now you have to take over the story. Good luck, So.
I mean, that's honestly what it feels like they did.
I saw so many things, and I was one of them that was just yelling Bortles, and like everyone was talking about how did Jason Mendoza go from like Jason Mendoza to the hot Star Wars baddie. And I do love,
dude, I don't know where Star Wars has gone in the past even like 3 years, I'd say, but hot Star Wars baddie was not on my bingo card for this year. the way that people talk about these characters, and it's just, what the hell happened to Star Wars? I actually don't know, and I don't really get very personal and honest about my point of view on Star Wars like right now, because there are things about Star Wars I still like right now, even with under Disney's control. There's shows I like and stuff. The fact that people are thirst trapping Chimera is weird to me, like very very weird. And the way that the show was written, to where Osha is like staring at him while he's naked and stuff, I just thought it was so weird, especially because the big argument for a lot of stuff when I say I don't like something about Star Wars is, well, it's made for kids. You're not the demographic for it. You're your age. And I'm like, okay, well, it's clearly not made for kids because he was naked in a pond and she's just staring him down. And there's some weird tension going on there that is not very kid friendly in my opinion. And I think it's quite weird actually that they wrote it into the show. But can't really talk too much about that because if I say anything, someone will get mad. And again, this is just my opinion on it, but I don't think that they should be able to write these types of things into quote unquote kid shows. But again, I don't want Star Wars to only be a kid show. I want it to be catered towards myself as well. And there's some stuff in this show that was when Chimera kills the Jedi. I think that was actually a pretty cool risk that they took to actually show those things. So partially it's cool, but very weird scenes going on in the more recent episodes that I do not agree with.
Of
Not very Star Wars like at
that
all.
we do get to still see him, because like before it was like the master was just like, let me say this thing about the Acolyte on a beach, and then I'm like, I'm gonna be here in the woods. But then we see like the human that is that kind of darkness in
Yeah.
like when he's fixing Osha and like healing her when she's standing, like laying in the woods, and like little things. And it's like it came from, I was like, oh, this is very almost Scorpio-y, because he's like, it's revenge driven more than just being like, I'm evil in the darkness. And
Scorpio.
I liked it when you were working on like, not the killings and not like Jackie dying in the worst possible way or a neck break. Was it important for you guys to like highlight, like, he's still a dude who very clearly like something happened that turned him into this, and it's not just
Yes.
I'm evil for evil's sake.
Oh, clearly.
Absolutely. Yeah. He always had to feel like he was operating from a place that, I think what you're saying, it had to be clear that his character was always operating from I want to say a human place, although that's a strange word to use in Star Wars, but for the sake of the answer, from a human place, meaning that as a human audience member, you would be able to follow and relate with, maybe not the murder, but you could definitely relate with what he's saying. When he says, I want freedom, they're like, well, yeah, everybody, how can you not want that? When he
But that's such a boring like trope. I want freedom. He says he wants freedom. He's basically painting the Jedi as bad, which we knew Leslie was going to do in this show. I mean, this is from the point of view as a Sith, from the Sith, as she said. And we've turned growing up with the prequels in the original trilogy, Luke being the most badass Jedi of all time, and Anakin even being a very cool Jedi, obviously turning, but Obi-Wan, all the characters that were Jedi were just so cool to me. And to get a show like this where the Jedi are so soft and bossed around all the time by each other, it just doesn't seem like Star Wars anymore. And a big thing I want to point out in this instance is like, yeah, we're supposed to feel connected to the human character that's turning to the dark side, like a lot of us did with Anakin. We don't really get that with Chimera because his only explanation was the Jedi treated him bad. And yeah, we already had that with Ahsoka, so and that was way stronger. We saw 7+ seasons. I think it was 7 seasons. Can't think of it right now, but of the Clone Wars, and obviously Ahsoka turns, and it's like we know why, because it was such an important thing for her to turn. It had to have happened. Turn away from the Jedi at least, and she doesn't follow Anakin's footsteps and turning straight to evil. She just kind of goes her own path, and I think that was a really cool, interesting way to take Ahsoka's character arc. Here we have Chimera basically saying like, I don't want to be held down by the restrictions of the Jedi, so I'm leaving the Jedi and I'm going to kill them all. So he wants freedom, but his only freedom that he wants is to use dark powers. So if you actually align with this character in real life, I think that's kind of insane. And I just don't think that you would align with him in real life unless you're like actually insane. Obviously, everyone wants freedom. Easiest answer she could have given, but not everyone needs to be murdering people. Not everyone needs to go against people that they don't like anymore for the sake of killing them. I don't get it. It just seems lazy to me.
The reason I'm doing this is because you say I can't exist. Like it's a very almost countercultural idea for.
She uses that word all the time.
I rewrote that scene so many times. I can't tell you that when I finally got You Brought Her Here, I was like, thank you, Jesus. Like I was like, it's so important what the first few lines this person says, so that exactly what you're saying, like you just get locked into his point of view as a character, not a bad guy. And I think him saying You Brought Her Here tells you almost everything that you need to know about the character, which is like, yes, I'm brutal. Yes, I just did something unforgivable, but you brought her here. You know, like you recruit children and you train them and you bring them into situations that they shouldn't be in. And now
this makes a lot of sense now. So now this is what she's doing is setting the precedent for the prequels with them training Anakin and even saying he's too old to be trained. This is where it all stems from, is the Acolyte show. So cool, we get to see it now. Basically what she's trying to say is this is the reason the Jedi stopped training kids at this age. All right. Also, the whole You Brought Her Here thing, he's also recruiting people at the same time that are most likely going to die. So I don't know. Does he actually have this soft side to him? Does Chimera have this soft side to him that he, actually is feeling bad because they recruit the kids? If he actually feels bad they're recruiting kids, why is he murdering them? Something again just doesn't really make sense. How could you be mad at me for killing the kids that you brought here? Because
putting it out there that possibly
the writing, dude,
that could be the case.
Blows my mind.
So he ended up being essentially very anti-establishment, which is obviously what the rebels are and the resistance is in Star Wars normally. But once I locked into like, oh right, he's the voice of the the counterculture of this era.
So the Jedi are the
which
bad
is why
guys.
it's so important to go through those first 4 episodes, because I think if you don't know what this world of Star Wars, the High Republic, is like, which we haven't seen in live action, you have to understand that the Jedi are not the Jedi that they are in the prequels. They're not the Jedi that they are, pre and post Battle of Yavin. Like they're in a different space where they're operating with less oversight, number one, and they're also operating with, I think, a little more hubris. Like, of course, we're doing the right thing. We're doing the right thing. This is how we've always done it, and that's the right thing. Of course, we're, when we seeing them on Brendok and seeing how they negotiate the issue with the witches and how children may be recruited by them. I mean, I know that sort of the idea, if I can sort of unpack it, I'm assuming that the idea was that parents give up their children almost as an act of public service. Like, we have a Force sensitive child, they would be better with you guys to train, et cetera, et cetera.
She doesn't know?
I think if, like Mother Anastasia and like Manny's character, they don't align their beliefs with the Jedi, and I'm assuming that there are some Force users that don't.
I gotta pause it again. Maybe Leslye doesn't know the show she wrote, because fast forward a couple episodes, this was obviously not the most recent interviews, so this was before the most recent episodes. Mother Anastasia, before she dies, says, I was going to let you guys take May and Osha, because Osha wanted to go with the Jedi. She says, I was going to let you take the girl. But Leslye here is saying that Mother Anastasia doesn't align with the values that taking young children is okay. But she ends up saying, I'll let you take the girl. It makes me think like the writing happened after this interview, and it just doesn't make any sense. It just blows my mind.
like, would they see children going to the Jedi as a good thing?
Hmm.
And why does it matter
I
if Chimera thinks it's a good? He's killing the kids. He's killing young Jedi. I just don't get
don't
it.
know. It just, to me, it was important that the audience understood all of that. That, like, there's this whole other way of looking at this world that isn't Qui-Gon getting Anakin out of a horrible situation so that he can become a Jedi. So it's a positive coded transition to, well, maybe that was a really positive situation, but perhaps there were other ones that were not. And did the Jedi learn from that? And when they did learn from that, is that why when Anakin shows up, they're like, he's too old to train. Like, we can't, we've learned that this doesn't work.
That was
Like,
pre-established. We already knew that, though.
I don't know. Those were the things that I was interested in.
Sorry again, but part of the dialogue here is we already knew that Anakin was technically too old to be trained. The Jedi say that in the prequels, so I don't. This whole show is basically saying this is why the Jedi do not train kids anymore. But we already knew that by basically all of the Jedi just turning down the training of Anakin because he was too old. We just knew that, it just doesn't make sense. Again, one line from the prequels summed up what we already knew. The boy can't be trained. And then now we get a whole, 10 episode show. I don't even know how many episodes the Acolyte is. Basically explaining that one line from the show.
And killing Carrie Ann off, so much of that was about just get ready because the Jedi are gonna take some L's and people are gonna die. And especially Jedi who have experienced, interactions with Sith on this show are gonna die. So, spoiler alert.
People are dying.
People are dead.
For my last question, I have to ask because we are now
All right, last
set up
question.
with two different pairings off on whatever together. Because
Oh yeah, we flipped mentors.
yeah,
mentors.
because
Yeah.
May is with Master Soul and Osha is with Chimere. But also, like, I probably looked way into it, but I was like, well, something happened with Soul and Chimere because he said the line like you didn't know, and I was like, I'm sure he was talking about when they met before, but I'm thinking it's something much deeper that happened in the past. When you do have,
It's probably not. Let's be
can you
honest.
tease of all these pairings and like what happens in the future that's not like here's everything that happens in the next
Well,
episode?
I think what I can say about Manny's character in Osha is that he's looking for an acolyte. He's looking for a pupil. I think it's pretty clear after this episode that he sees potential in Osha. Osha obviously being force sensitive, not having trained, but in the Sith world, does that matter? Is there a different? We don't know much about their policies on training. We know that, like,
There's nothing that happened in the episode to make Chimere think at all that Osha could potentially be the one that he needs to train. She doesn't do anything dark side. She doesn't go against anything. All that happens is May basically turns her back on her again and leaves her there to die. And all he does is go up Force Healer and takes her to a weird place, weird island, and strips in front of her. And all of a sudden now he's like, yeah, I got to train her. Same thing happened with Soul, though, with the kids, with the girls, the twins. He says he needs to train them so bad, but we don't really understand why. We don't really get any actual reasoning why any of this shit's going on.
A little bit with like Tyrannus and Ventress and stuff. We know a little bit, but most of the time those are people that started as Jedi, as Osha did. So the question then becomes, well, is he going to be able to turn her in some way? And so I'll tease that's obviously something but I don't even think that's a tease. I think it's something that if you're watching, it's very clear that's the next step. But what I can tease about it
It'll
is
probably
that
happen.
I was always really hit by Obi-Wan's line in A New Hope when he says Vader was seduced by the dark side. That made me feel weird because I was a kid and I didn't really understand what that word meant. And then later when I did, I was like, what's he talking about? So
What?
with...
Did she just make that sexual? Being seduced by the dark side? The word seduced? Yeah, there can be sexual ways to say that, but that is definitely not what Obi-Wan was getting at there. He's definitely saying, just the dark side can basically, steal you and force you to do that, turn dark. The fact that, again, Are these kid shows? Are they not? Leslye, let's get to the bottom of it. I mean, some of the things that she says are just really weird. That just blows my mind. The seduced line is weird to me. That is weird. And when I was a kid and watched it and heard that he said seduce, I didn't think a damn thing of it. So
With the
weird
way
mind.
that
And again, it's
someone
kind of
is turned
gross.
to the dark side or someone joins the Sith, it's, to me, it's all about seduction. It's all about appealing to the part of that person,
So
um,
she's liking the
or the
seduction
thing that person
turn.
wants the
That's
most.
why Chimera
You know,
gets
with
naked.
Anakin, it was to save his wife. You know, it was to stop the suffering of the person he loved more than anything in the world, more than his
Also,
own,
Anakin's turn goes
self.
way deeper than just Padme. I mean, it was building for 3 movies straight. It goes way deeper than just Padme.
That's why it's so tragic. Like
It's not why it's so
he
tragic.
almost like put her over so much stuff that he couldn't see the forest for the trees. And with May, it was revenge. Manny was definitely, you know, feeding into, well, if you want revenge, then, you know, come with me and you can do that. So Osha is going to be a different tactic. Like, what does Osha want? You know, and what does she want, you know, more than her present moral code would allow, what would her present moral code crumble under if she was offered? And I think for Osha, it's something more emotional. And I think if you've been watching the show, you know, close enough, I think you'll know where that's headed. And then I think with May and Soul, it's just, well, I'll just put it this way: I don't think Soul is Soul's a very powerful Jedi. I don't think he's totally in the dark about who's on that ship with him. That's what I'll say. Like.
He actually was, though. Like, the writing, again, in the writing, he did not know she was on the ship with him until the little robot, or the little tracker guy, told him. That's how Soul finds out that May was on the ship and not Osha. He doesn't see the big mark on her head. He doesn't notice that her hair was cut differently. It was definitely cut differently, by the way. She didn't get the length perfectly. She probably looks a little different. Among many different things, if you've been training one person for a long time, if you've been with your best friend for a long time, for instance, all of a sudden they get swapped out by their twin, you're probably going to know. Just off mannerisms, things like that, the way that they respond. She responds totally different than Osha did. So lots of things that you could tell as the viewer that she was different without even having to really know. That you would think Soul, using the Force or something, would be able to pick up on, especially because May has a little more dark side in her. You'd think Soul would kind of know that, and they wouldn't need a tracker for that. So that is just bad writing, in my opinion. I gotta say this before I end this. How does she get $180 million and have a worse setup than I do for a damn interview? My setup right here for YouTube is 10 times better than what she's doing right now. We're in 720p with horrible audio, horrible quality on everything. But at least she's got some cool Legos behind her. I'll give her that. That's it. That's all I'm going to say for this, interview here. I'm done talking about it. I'm done looking at this interview. Again, I think the writing and what Leslye says are two different things. Some of the things that Leslye answered in this interview, again, some of the episodes have come out since. Some of the things that she says about Mother Anastasia and about Soul not knowing May's on the ship, or knowing that she is kind of on the ship, a lot of that, after watching the most recent episodes, none of that is true. So I guess we'll just have to see where this goes. We're getting the last episode on this coming Tuesday, so tomorrow night for us. Probably today for you guys, actually, when this video is uploaded. But again, my mind is just blown. Some of the things she says, especially the seduction line, really shows and goes into play when Chimera is actually naked in front of May or Osha. And it's just kind of gross to me. I'm not going to lie, it's kind of gross because these types of things haven't really happened in Star Wars before, at least not to this level. So that's all I really have to say. Again, I don't care if you like the Acolyte, good for you. If you don't like the Acolyte, it's also good for you. I like civil discourse. I know that's something Star Wars Theory is a big proponent of, and I am as well. Again, this is just my opinion, and no hate to Leslye or anybody else or the interviewer. I've got no connections to any of them or anybody in Star Wars. I just like what I like, and I don't like what I don't like, and I do not like the Acolyte. That's it from me, guys. See you in the next one. May the Force be with you.